So moving on to the next topic, data visualizations. It's a sexy subject in a way. Lots of coffee table books, lots of very attractive coffee table books about it. Lots of resources online, lots of graphics like this, say if you search on Google or whatever. Common pitfalls, of course. So here's a graphic of Portuguese debt. Seems to be everything's kind of fairly hunky-dory, fairly stable, increasing slightly. Whoa, goes straight up. Can anyone see anything here that might cause for concern?
The way that the years are, it's got 1 year, and then jumps decades.
Yeah, so it's sort of like 1 year interval, etc., etc., 5-year interval, 10-year interval, 10-year interval. And actually, if one were to straighten that, make the scale truly linear, as it is here, you see that actually it describes a straight line. So it's not increasing exponentially. It is increasing, but at a constant rate. So similarly, with that graphic before, it wasn't wrong. It just wasn't helpful. It wasn't the best way to communicate the features of the data. Can anyone see a potential issue with this graphic here, which is the acceptance rate of patent applications? This was published in the Times by 3 selected countries.
Maybe they've got different.
Possibly. So this helpfully they've got the percentages on it. So you've got 24% here, 48% here. By the graphic, would you say, oh, that's about twice as much as that? You may not. Actually, height-wise, on that axis, I suspect it is, and that's probably how they've done it. However, they've also just increased the image just comprehensively on that axis as well, because of course, if they just increase the height of the bulb over here, it starts looking like a bit of a silly bulb. So they've increased the whole area of it, but of course now this is about 4 times as big as that. So it possibly wasn't. It's more interesting than a bar, but actually the way that it's been realized here, I think, misleads the eye, and it suggests that that's way more than twice as much when actually it isn't. So an alternative would have been to scale it, for example, by area that the bulb covers, or just use something else. Any issues with this pie chart? Does anyone want to point out? It doesn't. So pie charts, of course, typically, I mean, the fact that it's so manifestly absurd to you illustrates the fact pie charts typically describe a whole thing, like 100% or something, or one thing. The problem here is it was based on a survey where people could say their first and second choice of who they're going to back, and they just shoved all this in to the same pie chart and produced something ridiculous, really. Does anyone feel confident that they just give a few moments so that you can digest this graphic in a way? Do you know what's going on, basically? VAT rises.
Or is it just the outright rate of VAT?
Yeah.
Over, and they're doing their time clockwise.
So they've put time around here. It's not obvious why, but that's what they've chosen to do here. What's the origin? So here we've got that 17.5%, 20% there. Would you assume that was 0%? Yeah. It's not. So that's 4% there. So it started at 4%, and they're increasing it. It's the same problem as the light bulb thing. So on this axis, it's not fine because it doesn't start at 4%. It's a bit misleading, but it goes up by units of 1. However, because the nature of the graphic that they've chosen, the area covered gets so much greater as you're going out that, of course, comparing 8% to 17.5%, well, you wouldn't think that was just under half of that. You'd think it was a tiny fraction of 17.5%. It isn't, of course, and it's not the best. It's really by far from the best graphic they could have used to illustrate the history of VAT in Britain, I would argue. as has David Spiegelhalter. There's a graphic that he commented on his Understanding Uncertainty website, which is a very good website to look at. I'll just whittle through another example or two, suggestive at least of a political bias here. They've chosen to dispense of any units on the y-axis. They've chosen not to say that they're starting from, well, who knows what, say 5.8 million or something. So this is a situation where there was arguably there was a political point to be made in the fact that there is a bit of a shortfall in the number of people signing up for Obamacare a short time before the deadline ended. This is in Fox News. They did later correct it and produce a more helpful graphic, which illustrates that it's far less dramatic difference between those two figures. So of course, when using a graphic, choose an appropriate one. We've seen a few inappropriate ones there. Label the axis and your units. Use the right scale. Keep in mind the audience. And also keep in mind what they think you're intending by the graphic. And keep the message clear. So finding data sources and presenting data. There are a lot of very good resources now online of freely available data. And some journalistic organizations have in-house capabilities and departments as well to that end. Here's an example. The Trinity Mirror group have set up a data unit. Have any of you heard about that? So essentially, they produce data, as I understand it, for use within their own publications, and also some of it is accessible for general readers as well via various online presences. For example, they've devised their own metric for generating league tables of school performance. Now, that's a very controversial area, and not everyone would agree with the way that they've devised that metric, but a good thing about the way that they've done it is it's transparent. So you go in, you see this sort of league table, whatever it is, look at the map, and they've got a link, if you are so inclined, to find out about how they actually derive that particular way of ranking schools. A variety of organizations have an online presence wherefrom you can get data. The extent to which this is pre-packaged and made easy to interact with does vary quite a lot. So you'll see in this particular quote from the head of the Trinity Mirror's data unit is expressing how important he feels it is that they're making the data more accessible than just say reams of tables. That isn't always possible. I mean, sometimes data sets are just so big and so complicated, they're not always going to be in that sort of format. But in some instances, they certainly will be. And even if they're not sort of have some nice sort of digestible little widget you can use online, if it's just a data set there, they should be very well annotated, very well described what they've done, how they've measured their various variables, and so on. So here's an example of looking at, I believe that, data.gov.uk, just looking for data sets, seeing what they've got. In this news report, via, I think, an outlet of the Trinity Mirror group, they've got this sort of, you can download and access the data pertaining to how wet, how much rainfall there is in various cities. You can actually do that because they did it via this data wrapper thing, and it's got a nice little link there. If you wanted to, you could pull that data down and, of course, get data of your own from whatever source and open and run a huge variety of freeware or indeed, of course, there's other software which you need to pay for as well. But there's the provision of freeware out there is actually it's actually hugely impressive. So here I've downloaded the data. I've uploaded it as a comma separated file. essentially, you just need to get your data in a way in which the various data points are separated by an agreed and recognized means, be it commas, spaces, tabs, or whatever. And whatever you're bringing it into knows that. So here, this knows I had a comma-separated file. I brought it in, and I can start playing with how wet various cities in Britain are. And it allows quite a considerable degree of flexibility with actually relatively little upfront learning of how to use the tool. So here I've got the raininess of the cities there. I can choose to select a particular element. I live in Bristol. That's surprisingly dry, given how much it seems to rain there. So I can put all that in. I can start twisting it around. I can refine the chart, reverse the order, etc. If I wanted it to sort of appear like it's sort of like, like the little sort of like rain gauges or whatever, I can just twist it around like that. And I can proceed and publish it. And at the end of this process, I get a little tag and a link that I can incorporate into an HTML file, for example, that I'm publishing or whatever. This is just one of many, many ways online that you can investigate data and generate graphics in a very flexible environment. And a lot of this is, as well as potentially creating graphics that you may publish, it's also about communicating the data to yourself. So you might have a data set that it's a little bit hard to gauge the patterns and the trends within the data set. As soon as you plot it and present it to yourself via an appropriate means, you can quite quickly see that there may be interesting trends there or not.